All right, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. It's been a couple of days here, but today I wanted to put together a video for all of you newbies and beginners to the NFT space. So I want to talk about, strategies and tools and where is the best place to get information and how I actually go about finding projects and making trades and trying to become profitable in this space, because there is a lot of profit to be made, but at the same time there's a lot of noise. And so the name of the game is to kind of figure out how you can kind of distinguish between the noise and all of the gold and what's good. So before we get started, I just want to say thanks to everybody who subscribed so far. We've had 20 subscribers on the channel. It's actually pretty exciting for me. I feel like I put together a few videos and people seem to be finding them helpful. The one that is most helpful seems to be this NFT data tools video, and so we're going to cover some of the tools that I talked about in here, but if you haven't watched that video, definitely go check it out because it's helpful to know all of the different tools that you can use in the NFT space. So before we get into it, one thing to note is that none of this is financial advice, and you should do your own research. I'm just someone who is interested in the NFT and crypto and Web3 space, and I've been around here for since like August, so which seems like an eternity in NFT time. So have learned a few things after making a ton of mistakes. So I kind of want to share that and be helpful. But you should definitely do your own research into any projects that you decide to get into, because of course this is a very risky space and you should only play with money that you're willing to lose. All right, so with that out of the way, I want to first talk a little bit about which type of projects to get into. And I'm not talking about PFPs or generative art. I'm more talking about the mentality that you have when you get into a specific project. So in my mind, I kind of get into two types of projects. One is projects that are short term and quick flips, basically something that I know is there going to be a big drop or is currently pumping, or there's an influencer behind that I think I can kind of get in and get out relatively quickly, and then hopefully make a quick flip or some quick cash on those things. These kinds of projects are actually really risky because you're essentially just kind of gambling and trading based on what you think the market is going to do. Many times you can be wrong, and I have been wrong a ton of times, and it's an easy way to lose everything that you have. And you also have to be quite disciplined because you have to know kind of when to get in and out. But luckily, there are ways that you can kind of hedge your bets a little bit better by using a little bit of data and strategy to see what's a good thing to get in, what's a good thing not to get into. The second type of project is what I call medium to long term holds. This is essentially the type of projects that I'm mostly getting into now. These are projects where I've done deep research into the team, into the mechanics of the project, into what the future roadmap is of a given project, and I think that there is some utility down the line that I think is, even if I spend half ETH or 0.4 ETH or something on the larger side in my mind on a project, I think that if I hold it for a few months or weeks, that it'll have good utility. And so projects like this include, the littles in my mind, or doodles, things that are not necessarily blue chip level, but or message to Martians, which I talked about here. These are all kind of medium to long-term holds for me, where I think that I have a good idea of what the team is working on, and so I think there's going to be good utility. Now, the caveat to that is also, these projects can also have hiccups and kind of go down. So, for example, Animatus is a project I got into maybe a few months ago now. Because they were supposed to have, by December, they were going to have their Dungeons and Dragons and then their hover cars, and those things all released, but it just didn't make the price go up. In fact, Animatus is kind of hovering. I bought at 0.3 and it's hovering around like 0.2 right now, maybe even a little bit lower. But however, I really liked Animatus. I really liked the team. I liked the community. And so I bought in with the idea that even if this was to go to zero, it was one of the first projects that I wanted to get into in the NFT space. So I wouldn't mind that happening. So that's just something to think about. But today specifically, I want to talk about those short-term projects. Because it's a little bit more exciting, and it's fun to kind of get in and get out and find those gains. But B, I think there are some good tools and strategies that you can use to get in and get out. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is where we get our information in the NFT space. And I'm sure you've seen this in other videos, but the primary place to get all your information is Twitter. So anything and everything that's happening in the NFT space is happening on Twitter. Here here you're going to find, all the different projects that are able to be bought. They're going to have their own accounts. You're also going to have influencers like Dante Walker, who's a YouTuber, Bender, and just different projects. And this is where you're going to get all your information. And a lot of times what you'll see is a lot of the stuff that happens on Twitter is what actually causes the markets to move, because the NFT market is a relatively small market. And so anything and everything that's happening is really going to be happening on Twitter. So, I'll leave my Twitter link down below for you guys to follow. But I've kind of tried to curate my feed to be mostly people that I think can give good alpha and like kind of a good market picture of what's going on. I don't really follow a lot of projects. Like I follow some, like Squishy Squad. This is one that's upcoming, but many times what I'll do is when I'm following a project, once it's done, I'll try to unfollow it. Or if I see it in my timeline and it's not relevant anymore, like for example, Hammy Game, I don't really care about this anymore, unfollow it. And the reason for that is because I kind of want to keep my Twitter feed very clean, and I want to have great information. And a lot of times what will happen is, I'll see tweets that other people have liked or for example replied to, and then this is someone maybe I don't follow and it may look interesting, their 10 ETH to 500 ETH in 3 months, and so I'll go and click on them and I'll look through their tweets and see if it's useful to me, and if I find someone that I do think is interesting enough, I'll go ahead and follow them. So that's one way I find people to follow. The other way I find people to follow is I actually go to people that I think have good accounts and provide good information and see who they follow. So for example, Otto Suin is a influencer and generally provides good information. And so I'll maybe look at what they're following and I'll see, these are a bunch of people that I'm already following. And there may be overlaps, or I might find someone new that I didn't know of before, and I can kind of follow them from here. One thing to note about influencers is, this is helpful, but you want to actually think of two things, not one thing, two things. So one, you have to understand that when people are buying into projects and, even if an influencer is pumping them, they have much more ETH than you do. So Otto Suin or Shamdu or all these people, whenever they get into a project, they have a lot of ETH to spend. And so if they lose something, they don't really care. And a lot of times that's what happens is, you see Shamdu get into something and you get hyped, and then you go in and you want to buy in that project. And then if it goes to zero, it doesn't really matter to Shamdu, but if it goes to zero, it'll matter a lot more to you. And so that's why I don't really try to chase influencer pumps. I usually use influencers to find better projects that are either in development or about to be released, and I'll try to get into those projects early. So that's kind of how you want to use your Twitter. The big thing here is just to create a good list of accounts for you to follow. I'll link my Twitter below, so if you want a starter list, you can go through the people that I follow, and it'll be helpful. But to be active on here, even if you start responding, a lot of people, they don't have huge following, so they'll respond back. I've talked to Bender, I've talked to Kosher Plug, I've talked to a lot of these people because the NFT space is pretty small. And people are willing to help you out. So just know that. And Twitter is where you're going to get all your alpha. The other big thing is Discord. So I'm not going to go into my Discord because it's a mess. But the idea there is obviously once you find a project that you like, you can join its Discord. A lot of people join Discord to see how the project is doing and if what's the vibe like and if it's active. That is a good metric. I don't really rely on that much. I feel like, yeah, okay, there could be a lot of activity. But what I actually use the Discord for is I'll go through the announcements. I'll go through the roadmap, the updates, what's planned, to try to get a better indication of how that project is going to do in the future. And so that's primarily what I use Discord for. And then I actually try to get into smaller communities and have actual conversations and, ask questions, get things answered. And you'll be very surprised at how willing people are to answer your questions if you kind of want to get in and be friendly and kind of just have a good vibe and try to be helpful or try to ask relevant questions. People are very open to the space. And then the only other thing that I'd recommend with Discord is I actually do think it's generally helpful to find one or two Discords where it's rather not a project, but rather a community. It's called an alpha group, some people call it. So I'm in one called Alpha Access. It's actually really cheap to get in now. You have to buy an NFT to actually validate to get into the community. I've been in there for many, many months, and I really like the people, and we've kind of got to know each other. And so we have a good dynamic. And so whenever there's a project or whenever there's a question about something, I can go in there and talk to people and get some of the vibes. But that's just one example of a community. Another one is the Plug Pass by Kosher Plug. So there's a ton of these communities. You can just kind of get in I think it's worth being in at least one or two, mostly because it helps you give a pulse check of the market, and then also people discover things that you may not discover, and so that's just the name of the game in this space, is to find the information in the best way possible. So those are the two ways that I kind of take in information in the NFT space: Twitter and Discord. YouTube, these videos are helpful, but as you can imagine, that they're not really in real time. So and Instagram also not really that good. So the most real-time stuff is going to come from Twitter and Discord. All right, so now that we have that kind of taken care of, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is, let's say, you want to be into this short-term project. You kind of want to see, I have a couple of like 0.2 ETH to spend today. What are things that I can get in? Because, every day there's going to be at least some money worth to be making, but you want to be able to pick your bets correctly. And for this, I use kind of two tools. I use Mobi.gg and Icy Tools. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with this. I'm actually on the Icy lifetime plan. I got in really early, so I've had Icy for a while, and Icy is actually making a ton of improvements. And as is Mobi, and that's why I like both of these platforms, is because things are changing all the time, and they're very open to feedback. And many times that you'll see new features come in that are rivaling things like Nonsen, which is another tool, but Nonsen's a little bit more expensive, so I'm not going to get into Nonsen here today. But I use these for very specific purposes, so I'm going to talk about them, and it's relatively simple. So in IC, I mostly focus on these two tabs: trending and discover. And what this means is, trending is anything that's on the market, so essentially anything that's in secondary, like OpenSea. And I usually go in between these three time periods: 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 30 minutes. And I'll see, okay, these are the things that are kind of doing well in the market right now. And if anything looks interesting, like I know a bunch of these projects because I've already researched a bunch of them. But for example, if I didn't know one and it suddenly came on the rise, I could quickly go in here. For example, Slim Hoods, I could go to their website, their OpenSea, their Twitter, Discord, and kind of start my research there. And that's where the research part gets in. And these are things you may want to, do quick research on, and the best way to do it is, for example, Slim Hoods is pumping. Maybe you would go to Twitter and you would just type in Slim Hoods, and you would see like what's going on. And the best way to do it is, I usually go latest, and the reason this is happening right now is because Mood Rollers and Slim Hoods are partner projects, and I think these just minted or recently minted or something. And Zeneca had these guys on his spaces, and so this is why this is Mood Roller sold out in 10 minutes. So I know that this is why this is probably pumping right now. And so that's one way I use IC, is to find trending projects. The other thing I do is I use things that are minting. So the Discover tab is for projects that are minting currently, and it'll tell you, how many unique minters there are, how many mints that have happened in this time period. And the unique minters tab is actually pretty helpful, because it helps you figure out that is there just one whale that's going in and buying everything, or is it like different people are kind of getting into this project. And so this kind of gives you a pulse check. I try not to mint things a lot, because unless I've like really followed a project for a while, because minting is relatively risky, and things can go to zero, and it's not as established as something that's on secondary. But once in a while I'll look in here and see things mint, and I'll kind of again do the same thing: click in, do the research, go to their Twitter, see what's happening. And a lot of these crypto punk things are pumping right now because of the latest punk sale that happened. So those are the two ways I use IC. And again, the idea is that this is just a starting off point. You really want to go from here and then do a little bit more research, and then go to OpenSea and find a price that you feel comfortable in. And before you get in, you also want to have an idea in your mind, where do I feel comfortable selling? So that's IC. Mobi is actually what I really like as well, and the biggest reason for that is this live feed. And so this is I use Mobi for two things. One is notifications, where you can set up specific wallets to follow. So I have like 4 or 5 wallets that I follow, and I'll get pings in Discord whenever they mint or buy something. But I really like this because I can just have this up on my computer. And so, for example, you can see this is real time. These crypto non-punks are just minting out right now. So I probably won't get into it because it's a derivative project, and I don't really like derivative projects. But you can imagine that, if something a stealth drop happens and suddenly you see this whole page kind of with one specific project, you can go in and kind of grab it when other people may not know. And that's the name of the game, is where can you get your information the fastest. And so I really, really like this live feed of mints. They also have live feeds of sales. So this is another thing that you can do is, in addition to having Icy, you can see like, if a bunch of mood rollers are selling, like I know that this is probably even going crazy on the secondary, so I may want to get in. So I really like having both of these pages up. I have them open in two different windows usually and just sitting on my screen while I'm working or doing other things. And, just periodically I'll take a look, and if I see something, I know I can get in. And I actually did this the other day with voxel lands, like a land plot thing. After the whole World Wide Web lands went up, I saw these voxel lands kind of pumping. There was only 750 of them, and I bought two, and I doubled my money in like an hour or so. So that was actually pretty helpful. And then the third tab, as you can see, real time whales minting. So this is kind of interesting, right? There's a bunch of whales as tagged by Moby who are minting these crypto non-punks. So it might be something worth looking into. I would not be looking into it, but it might be something worth looking into. So those are kind of the things that I use Moby and Icy for. And I think that, if you guys are trying to get in and do this short-term flipping strategy, this is one method to do it. I'm not saying this is the only method, but this is one method to kind of, if you're at home and you kind of have some time to just have this up on your computer, and you'll find some gems in here. A lot of it just takes a little bit of time and waiting, and you really want to just make sure that you have, at least when you're going into these smaller projects and trying to make a quick flip, that you're actually going in with some data to back it up. And I think that'll probably be helpful for people who have smaller wallet sizes. And so, this is hopefully useful and helpful to all of you. If you want to give it a try, I would highly recommend both of these tools. I think they're actually both subscription based now, but they're not that expensive. So you should look into that yourself. And if you want to just start with one, I'd probably start with Moby, because Moby also gives you kind of the rankings and things like that. Similar to Icy, I just kind of like Icy's framework or view a little bit better. So that's all I have for you guys today. Hope this was a useful video, and I hope you guys learned something. And I'll probably start making more of these type of beginner tutorial videos as well, because I think this space can be a little bit confusing. So if you did enjoy this video, please give it a like down below and hit the subscribe button for any future videos I make. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.